All right, so get this.
Right.
Picture this.
Okay.
It's December 27th, 2024.
Right.
Most people are winding down from the holidays.
Yeah.
But the IRS decides to drop a major announcement that's got the entire crypto world in a frenzy.
Oh, wow.
They've just released new rules that could classify a huge chunk of DeFi platforms as brokers.
Really?
You know, the kind that need to know everything about you and report all your transactions.
Huh. Interesting.
So we're here to do a deep dive into this
Go
with
ahead.
a whole stack of articles and expert opinions.
Sounds good.
This isn't just about crypto, though.
Okay.
This has ripple effects on the future of finance as we know it.
Wow.
We've got to ask,
Yeah.
is the IRS stepping out of line here?
Mm.
Can Congress actually do anything to stop it?
Right.
And what does this mean for everyday DeFi users like you?
Yeah. Good questions.
Luckily, we've got an expert here to unpack all of this.
I'll do my best.
So first things first, what does it even mean for a DeFi platform to be classified as a broker?
Right.
That doesn't sound very decentralized.
Yeah, you're right. It goes against the grain of the whole DeFi philosophy.
Right.
Essentially, the IRS is saying that some DeFi platforms are acting like traditional financial brokers,
Okay.
like those handling stocks, or even centralized crypto exchanges.
I see.
And that means they'd have to follow the same rules,
Okay.
starting with KYC, know your customer.
Right.
That's the process where financial institutions need to verify your identity, address all that fun stuff.
So DeFi users would have to give up their anonymity?
Potentially, yes.
Hmm.
It depends on how DeFi platforms choose to respond to this ruling.
Okay.
But KYC isn't the only thing on the table.
Oh.
These platforms would also be on the hook for reporting all user transactions to the IRS.
Wow.
That's a logistical nightmare for decentralized systems, which were designed to operate without this kind of centralized oversight.
And reading through these articles, the crypto industry is not taking this lying down.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The backlash has been intense, and rightfully so. Jake Chervinsky, who's a leading legal expert in the crypto space, didn't mince words.
Oh.
He straight up called the rule unlawful and said it needs to be thrown out, whether by the courts or by the next administration.
Others are pinning their hopes on Congress, especially with the talk of a pro-crypto Congress, using this thing called the Congressional Review Act.
Right.
What's that all about?
The Congressional Review Act, or CRA, gives Congress the power to review and potentially overturn regulations put in place by federal agencies like the IRS.
Okay.
It's a potent tool, and it could definitely change the game if it's used successfully.
So we've got potential legal battles, maybe Congress getting involved, things
Yeah.
can get messy.
Definitely.
But before we dive into all that, let's zoom in on the wording of the IRS ruling itself.
Okay.
It seems like the devil's in the details here.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
One phrase that keeps popping up and that has a lot of people worried is effectuate transactions.
Okay.
What does the IRS even mean by that?
Right.
And why is everyone making such a big deal about it?
Yeah, it sounds a bit vague, to be honest.
It does.
Right.
And that's precisely the problem. Miles Jennings, the general counsel of A16's a major crypto investment firm, is particularly concerned about this wording.
Okay.
He argues that the IRS is interpreting effectuate transactions so broadly
Right.
that it could give them a huge amount of power over DeFi.
Wait, so it's not just about KYC and reporting.
Right.
Is the IRS trying to control even more of what happens in DeFi?
That's the worry.
Oh.
The IRS claims this rule could affect as many as 875 DeFi brokers and 2.6 million taxpayers.
Wow.
That's massive.
Yeah.
However, the ruling does make some exceptions.
Okay, so there are some glimmers of hope.
There are.
Tell me more.
Miles Fuller, a cryptotax expert, points out that the IRS specifically excludes validation services and wallet software providers from the broker definition.
Can you remind me what those are exactly?
Sure. Think
Yeah, good.
of them as the behind-the-scenes players in DeFi. Validation services confirm transactions on the blockchain, while wallet software provides the interface for you to interact with DeFi.
Gotcha.
These services are critical.
Yeah.
But they don't directly handle the exchange of assets like a decentralized exchange would.
Right.
So the software itself might be exempt even if the platform using it isn't.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if a decentralized exchange does fall under the IRS's definition of a broker, what are their options?
Alex Thorne, who heads research at Galaxy Digital,
Okay.
outlines 3 main paths DeFi projects could take.
Okay.
And spoiler alert,
Oh.
none of them are easy.
Let's hear them. Option one.
Option one is the most straightforward, at least on the surface.
Oh,
Comply.
okay.
DeFi platforms could rework their systems to meet the KYC and reporting requirements and effectively become regulated brokers.
But wouldn't that go against the whole point of DeFi being decentralized?
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It would require a huge shift in how many DeFi protocols operate.
Right.
Plus, there are real technical challenges in implementing KYC on a decentralized platform. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
So comply or face the consequences. What's option two?
Option two is a bit more drastic.
Wow.
Block U.S. users. It's basically saying, if we can't play by your rules, we won't play at all.
We've seen this geo-blocking tactic in other parts of the crypto world.
Right.
What are the potential consequences there?
It might seem like the easiest solution in the short term.
All right.
It could have a chilling effect on innovation within the U.S. DeFi space.
Right.
It could also drive users towards less regulated and potentially riskier platforms outside the U.S.
I see.
It's a bit of a lose-lose situation.
So comply or block.
Right.
What's the third option? This better be good.
Option three is a gamble. A long shot, really.
Okay.
Thorne suggests DeFi projects could hit pause on innovation. No new features, no upgrades.
Right.
And they stop collecting fees.
Wow.
They essentially try to fly under the IRS's radar by being as bare bones and decentralized as possible.
So basically, they go into hibernation and hope the IRS forgets about them.
It's definitely a risky move.
Yeah.
And it would likely mean sacrificing growth and development.
Right.
But it highlights just how difficult the situation is for DeFi projects.
This whole thing feels like a tug of war.
It does.
On one side, you have the IRS trying to rein in DeFi and make it play by the existing financial rules. And on the other, you have this whole movement that's trying to build a new decentralized financial system from scratch.
It's a classic clash of ideologies.
Yeah.
And the outcome of this fight will have implications far beyond the crypto world.
And speaking of fights, we can't forget about the lawsuit that's been filed against the IRS.
Right. The Texas Blockchain Council, the Blockchain Association, and the DeFi Education Fund have joined forces to challenge the IRS in court.
Okay.
They argue that this new rule is unlawful and unconstitutional, claiming it's a massive overreach of authority.
So it sounds like they're not just questioning whether DeFi should be regulated, but who has the power to do it and how that power is being used.
Exactly.
This could get really interesting.
Absolutely. It boils down to a question of legal interpretation.
Right.
Ultimately, the courts will decide whether the IRS was justified in making this move.
Something that stood out to me in these articles was a comment by Bill Hughes, an attorney at Consensus.
Okay.
He seemed to imply that the IRS deliberately released this rule on December 27th, right before the holidays, to avoid immediate scrutiny.
Yes. The timing is certainly curious, and it raises questions about the IRS's motives.
Well, regardless of why they did it, what they did has thrown a major wrench into the gears of the DeFi world.
There's no doubt about that.
So we've got the IRS making its move, the industry pushing back, and a potential showdown in the courts.
Right.
And on top of all that, we've got Congress watching from the sidelines, possibly ready to step in.
It's a complicated situation for sure.
Okay, so we've covered the IRS ruling the industry's fiery response, possible legal and congressional battles, and the tough choices DeFi projects are facing.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out for a second. What does this whole showdown tell us about the U.S. government's stance on crypto?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
It's complex.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you could argue that the IRS is simply trying to do its job,
Right.
apply existing tax laws to a new and evolving technology.
Makes sense.
They want to make sure everyone's paying their fair share, prevent tax evasion, and maintain control over the financial system.
That's a fair point.
But on the other hand, many critics see this as a deliberate attempt to stifle innovation and maintain the dominance of traditional finance. They argue that DeFi challenges the very power structures that the government relies on.
Right.
And they're not going to let that happen without a fight.
It's like they see DeFi as a threat, not an opportunity.
There's definitely that tension there.
Right.
How the U.S. government handles this situation will send a powerful message to the global crypto community. Will the U.S. become a DeFi haven or a graveyard?
Wow. That's a dramatic way to put it, but I see your point.
It is a pivotal moment.
Yeah. This is about way more than just taxes.
Absolutely.
It's about control, innovation, and the future of finance.
Exactly. So with that in mind, let's delve deeper into the potential impacts of this ruling
Okay.
and what it could mean for the future of DeFi, both in the U.S. and globally.
Sounds good.
All right.
So let's get into it.
Okay. It's too early to predict the outcome with certainty.
Right.
But this much is clear.
Yeah.
The stakes are high.
For sure.
The ripple effects of this IRS ruling the lawsuits and potential actions from Congress could shape the future of DeFi on a global scale.
It's interesting. When you lay it all out like that, it feels like this goes way beyond just taxes.
Right.
It's almost like a philosophical battle between two completely different visions of what finance should be.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's about who has control, the pace of innovation, and ultimately individual freedom.
Right.
The core idea of DeFi is to empower individuals by giving them more control over their finances. It's about cutting out the traditional middlemen and building a financial system that's more open and accessible.
I see.
But that vision clashes head-on with the way things have always been done,
Yeah.
where governments and centralized institutions call the shots.
It's like DeFi is trying to build this decentralized utopia,
Right.
but it still has to exist in the real world where regulations and real-world consequences matter.
Exactly. That's the heart of the struggle we're witnessing.
Right.
How do we strike a balance between fostering innovation and freedom while ensuring consumer protection and regulatory oversight? It's a complex challenge, and there are no easy answers.
So let's bring this back to our listener.
Okay.
Why should they care about this DeFi versus IRS showdown?
Right.
What's at stake for them?
Well, if you're already using DeFi platforms, this ruling could directly impact how you interact with them.
How so?
You might have to jump through more hoops to verify your identity, and your transactions could be under greater scrutiny from the IRS.
So much for the seamless, decentralized experience DeFi promised, huh?
It's definitely a setback.
Yeah.
But beyond those practical implications, this situation raises some fundamental questions about the future of finance that everyone should care about.
Okay.
Do we want a world where financial innovation is welcomed and nurtured, even if it comes with certain risks? Or do we prioritize stability and control, even if it means potentially slowing down progress?
These are huge questions that go far beyond just the crypto space.
They do.
They touch on individual liberty, the role of government in a digital world. It's all connected.
Precisely. And the answers aren't going to be neatly packaged in a single court case or piece of legislation.
Right.
This is a conversation that's going to continue evolving, and it's one that we all need to participate in.
Earlier, we talked about how the IRS wants DeFi platforms to implement KYC processes.
Right.
But how realistic is that from a technical standpoint?
That's a great question, and it highlights one of the biggest challenges this ruling presents.
Okay.
Many DeFi platforms are built on the principle of anonymity and pseudonymity. Implementing traditional KYC procedures would require a fundamental redesign of these systems.
So what are some potential workarounds? Could DeFi projects find ways to comply with KYC regulations without completely compromising their decentralized nature?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something a lot of bright minds in the DeFi space are working on right now.
Oh, wow.
There are some promising avenues being explored, like zero-knowledge proofs and on-chain identity solutions.
Can you explain those in simple terms for our listeners?
Sure. Zero-knowledge proofs are a fascinating cryptographic technique that allows you to prove something is true without revealing the underlying data.
Okay.
It's like being able to prove you're over 21 without showing your ID.
Gotcha.
In the context of DeFi, this could allow users to prove their identity to a platform without giving up their anonymity.
That sounds pretty cool. What about on-chain identity solutions?
On-chain identity solutions aim to create decentralized systems for managing and verifying identities.
Okay.
These systems would use blockchain technology to store and secure identity information.
Right. Giving users more control over their data and potentially streamlining the KYC process.
It sounds like these technologies could be a game changer both for DeFi and for online privacy in general.
Absolutely. If they can be implemented effectively.
Yeah.
They could offer a way for DeFi to navigate this regulatory landscape without sacrificing its core principles.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the potential for Congress to intervene.
Right.
We mentioned the Congressional Review Act earlier.
Right.
How likely is it that Congress actually uses this to overturn the IRS ruling?
That's hard to say for sure.
Okay.
It depends on a lot of factors, including the political climate, the level of public outcry, and the strength of lobbying efforts on both sides.
Right.
The CRA has been used successfully in the past to overturn regulations,
Okay.
but it's not a slam dunk.
Are there any potential roadblocks that could prevent Congress from using the CRA?
There are a few.
Okay.
First, the CRA has a limited time frame.
Right.
Congress can only use it to overturn regulations that were recently finalized.
Right.
Oh, I see.
So timing is crucial.
Okay.
Second, using the CRA requires a joint resolution of Congress and the president's signature.
Right.
If the president vetoes the resolution,
Yeah.
Congress would need a 2/3 majority vote in both chambers to override the veto.
So it sounds like there are some hurdles to overcome.
There are.
What about public opinion?
Hmm.
Do you think there's enough public support for DeFi to sway Congress?
Public awareness of DeFi is still relatively low,
Yeah,
but that could change quickly if this issue gains more traction in the media.
right.
If everyday Americans start to see this as a fight for financial innovation and freedom,
Yeah.
it could put pressure on Congress to act.
Earlier, we discussed the lawsuit filed against the IRS,
Right?
but we didn't get into the specifics of the legal arguments.
Okay.
Can you break down the key points for our listeners?
Sure. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit,
Yeah.
which include industry groups like the Texas Blockchain Council and the Blockchain Association, are making a few central arguments.
Okay.
First, they claim that the IRS exceeded its authority in classifying DeFi platforms as brokers.
Right.
They argue that the IRS's interpretation of existing tax law is overly broad
Okay.
and doesn't accurately reflect the unique nature of decentralized finance.
So it's not just about whether DeFi should be regulated,
Exactly.
but who has the authority to do it and how that authority is being used.
Right.
It's a question of legal boundaries.
Exactly. The lawsuit also argues that the IRS rule is unconstitutionally vague
Okay.
and violates the Administrative Procedure Act, which sets guidelines for how federal agencies can create and enforce regulations.
Right.
They claim that the rule fails to provide clear guidance on how DeFi platforms should comply
I see.
and gives the IRS too much discretion in enforcement.
So the lawsuit is challenging the IRS's interpretation of existing tax law and the way they went about creating this rule.
That's right.
That sounds like a pretty strong legal challenge.
It's definitely a significant legal battle.
Yeah.
And the outcome could have major implications for the future of DeFi regulation.
It's interesting to think about the timing of all of this.
Mm.
We're on the cusp of a new year,
Right.
a new Congress, and potentially a new administration.
A lot of change on the horizon.
Do you think this changing political landscape will have any impact on how this DeFi versus IRS saga plays out?
It's certainly possible.
Okay.
A new administration could bring a different perspective on crypto and DeFi regulation. And with a new Congress comes the opportunity to reintroduce legislation
Right.
that could clarify the regulatory framework for DeFi,
So there's a chance for a reset,
potentially.
a fresh start in the relationship between the crypto world and regulators.
There's always hope for a more collaborative and constructive approach.
That would be great.
It's crucial for both sides to come to the table and engage in a dialogue that fosters innovation
Right.
while addressing legitimate concerns about consumer protection and financial stability.
What do you think the ideal outcome of all this would be? What would a balanced and sensible regulatory framework for DeFi look like?
That's a complex question. But here are a few key elements I think are important.
Okay.
Clarity.
Okay.
Regulations should be clear, concise, and easy to understand.
Makes sense.
They should clearly define what constitutes a DeFi platform and what activities fall under the scope of regulation.
All right. What else?
Flexibility.
Okay.
The regulatory framework should be flexible enough to adapt to the rapid evolution of DeFi.
Gotcha.
It should allow for innovation and experimentation without stifling growth.
Right. Proportionality.
Proportionality, exactly.
Okay.
Regulations should be proportionate to the risks posed by different DeFi activities.
Mm-hmm.
Low-risk activities should be subject to lighter touch regulation, while higher-risk activities may require more stringent oversight.
Okay.
Decentralization.
Okay.
Regulation should be designed in a way that respects the decentralized nature of DeFi. They should avoid imposing centralized control mechanisms that undermine the core principles of the technology.
Makes sense. And finally,
Collaboration. Right. Regulators should work closely with the DeFi community to develop regulations that are both effective and supportive of innovation.
Those are some really insightful points.
Thank you.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
What can listeners do to stay informed and engaged in this evolving landscape?
That's a great question, and it leads perfectly into a critical point I'd like to make.
Okay.
The future of DeFi, and to some extent the future of finance, is being shaped right now.
Wow.
It's not just a spectator sport, it's a participatory event.
So what can our listeners do to stay informed and maybe even get involved in shaping the future of DeFi?
Great question. Staying informed is key. Follow reputable news sources, engage with thought leaders on social media, and subscribe to newsletters that focus on crypto and DeFi. Knowledge is power, especially in a fast-moving space like this.
And beyond just staying informed, what about actually getting involved? What can people do to make their voices heard?
There are tons of ways to get involved. Join online communities and forums where DeFi is being discussed. Participate in governance processes for DeFi protocols you use. Contact your elected officials and let them know how you feel about crypto regulations. Support organizations that are advocating for responsible DeFi policies. Every voice matters in this debate.
One thing that struck me while reading through these articles is how much disagreement there is, even within the crypto community itself, about how to approach regulation. Some people welcome it, some people fear it. It's not a simple black and white issue.
That's so true. There's a spectrum of opinions, and it's important to understand the nuances of those different viewpoints. Some people believe that regulation is inevitable and that embracing it is the best way to ensure DeFi's long-term success. They argue that clear rules will foster mainstream adoption and attract institutional investors.
Makes sense. But others are worried that regulation could stifle innovation and undermine the core principles of decentralization.
Exactly. They fear that heavy-handed regulation could turn DeFi into a centralized permission system that looks a lot like traditional finance, defeating the whole purpose of the movement. And then there are those who believe that DeFi should remain completely unregulated, a wild west of financial experimentation.
That sounds a bit risky, to be honest.
It definitely comes with its own set of challenges and potential downsides. Navigating this complex landscape requires careful consideration of the trade-offs involved.
It feels like we're at a crossroads. The decisions that are made today will have a ripple effect for years to come. It's almost as if we're writing the rules of a new financial system in real time.
That's a powerful way to put it, and it underscores the importance of thoughtful and informed participation in this debate.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the specifics of the IRS ruling to the broader philosophical questions it raises.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you and shedding light on such an important and evolving topic.
As we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. Even if this particular IRS ruling is overturned or modified, the underlying tension between DeFi's pursuit of decentralization and the desire for regulatory clarity isn't going away.
This is just one battle in a much larger war for the future of finance. A war that will be fought not just in courtrooms and legislative chambers, but also in the minds of individuals who are deciding what role they want to play in shaping that future.
The future of DeFi, and perhaps even finance as we know it, is being written right now. Will it be a story of unfettered innovation and individual empowerment? A tale of regulatory capture and centralized control, or something in between? The answer, to a large extent, depends on the choices that individuals, policymakers, and innovators make in the coming months and years. Stay informed, engage in the conversation, and help shape the financial world you want to see.